The elevator doors slid open on the 47th floor, and Michelle stepped into the marble lobby of Tang Sang's roof garden apartment at exactly 11:47 p.m. She wasn't supposed to be here. The contract was clear: separate residences, minimal contact, absolutely no unannounced visits. But the USB drive in her purse contained something that couldn't wait until their scheduled Tuesday meeting. She pressed the doorbell once, twice. On the third ring, the door swung open and Tang Sang stood there in nothing but black silk pajama pants, his hair disheveled, phone pressed to his ear. His eyes widened when he saw her, but he didn't speak, just stepped aside to let her in while continuing his conversation in rapid Korean. Michelle had seen him in boardrooms, at galas, even at their own wedding 3 weeks ago. But she'd never seen him like this, unguarded, almost vulnerable. She looked away, focusing instead on the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He ended the call abruptly. "What are you doing here?" "Your mother's accountant sent me these files by mistake." Michelle pulled out the USB drive. "I think you'll want to see them before sunrise." Tang Sang took the drive, his fingers briefly brushing hers. "You could have emailed. Not this. Not over any network." She watched his face as understanding dawned. Someone's been siphoning money from the Seoul branch, $7 million over 6 months. He was already moving toward his study and she followed without invitation. The room smelled like leather and his cologne, something expensive she could never quite identify. He plugged in the drive and they both stared at the screen as spreadsheets filled with red flag transactions loaded. "This coding," he muttered, leaning closer. "Only 4 people have access to these accounts." 5, Michelle corrected. "Your mother's accountant makes 5. Tang Sang's jaw tightened. His mother, Choi Min-ji, was the empire. She'd built Tang Industries from a single textile factory into a multinational conglomerate, and she'd made it brutally clear that Michelle was nothing more than a 60-day experiment. A contract marriage to satisfy American investors who wanted to see Tang Sang settled before they'd commit to the merger. After 60 days, they'd quietly divorce. Michelle would receive her agreed-upon sum, and Tang Sang would marry the woman his mother had already chosen, a woman from the right family with the right connections. Michelle was just a placeholder with a signed NDA and a bank account that would be substantial enough to finally pay off her mother's medical debts. "We need to call the auditors," Michelle said. "No." Tang Sang's response was immediate. "If this leaks before the merger closes, we lose everything. The deal is set to finalize in 2 weeks." "So what do you want to do? Pretend $7 million didn't just vanish?" He turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her step back. "I want you to find out who did this." "Me? I'm an art curator, not a forensic accountant." "You have an economics degree from Princeton. I read your file." Of course he had. "That was 7 years ago. I haven't touched a spreadsheet since—" "You found this pattern in less than an hour. The accountant didn't catch it. Our internal team didn't catch it. You did." He moved closer, and she could smell whiskey on his breath. "I can't trust anyone in the company right now. But you? You have no stake in this empire, no reason to protect anyone. Except you're paying me $1 million to play your wife for 60 days. "I'll double it." The offer hung in the air between them. $2 million, enough to clear her mother's debts and give her sister a proper wedding, and maybe finally buy that gallery space she'd been dreaming about for 5 years. "I'll need full access to all financial records," she said quietly. "No restrictions. Done. And if I find out it's someone close to you, someone you care about," his eyes were dark, unreadable, "then I'll deal with it." Michelle nodded slowly. "I'll start tomorrow." "Start now," she blinked. "It's almost midnight. And whoever's stealing from us thinks they're safe. They think no one's watching." He pulled up a chair next to his. "Show me what you found." For the next 3 hours, they worked in silence, broken only by the clicking of keys and occasional questions. Michelle traced the pattern backward, finding smaller transactions dating back 18 months. each one carefully disguised as legitimate expenses. Whoever was doing this was smart, patient, and had intimate knowledge of the company's financial systems. Around 3 a.m, Tang Sang stood and stretched. "You're good at this. I'm good at patterns. It's why I love art restoration. You look for what doesn't belong. Is that what you think you are here? Something that doesn't belong?" The question caught her off guard. In 3 weeks of marriage, they'd barely spoken beyond what was necessary for public appearances. She knew he took his coffee black, that he worked 18-hour days, that his mother called him every morning at 7 sharp. But she didn't know him. "Don't I?" she asked. Instead of answering, he walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of scotch. He handed her one and their fingers touched again. Longer this time. "My mother thinks you're temporary," he said. "A prop in her business strategy." "Aren't I?" Maybe that was the plan. He took a drink, his eyes never leaving hers. "But you're here at midnight with evidence of fraud, working through the night to protect an empire that isn't yours. That's not what props do." Michelle's heart was beating faster than it should. This wasn't in the contract. These looks, this conversation, the way he was standing close enough that she could feel the heat from his skin. "The contract says—" "I know what the contract says. I wrote it." His phone buzzed on the desk, and he glanced at it, his expression shifting instantly. "It's my mother. She's coming here. Now. At 3 a.m. She knows you're here. Building security must have alerted her." He was already moving, pulling a shirt from the closet. "She can't know about the fraud. Not yet. If she thinks there's any threat to the merger, she'll shut down the investigation. She'll shut down everything." He turned to her, and there was something almost desperate in his eyes. "Can you pretend, for just a few more hours, that this marriage is real?" Michelle finished. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Tang Sang looked at her, waiting for an answer that would change everything. The contract marriage was supposed to be simple. No feelings, no complications, no real intimacy. Just business. But Michelle thought about the way he'd said "our empire" when talking about the theft, about how he'd trusted her with something he couldn't trust his own people with, about the way he was looking at her now like she was more than a signature on a contract. She set down her glass and walked toward him, reaching up to fix his collar. "Your mother's very perceptive. If we're going to convince her, we need to sell it." "What are you suggesting?" The doorbell rang again, more aggressively. Michelle smiled, the kind of smile that held secrets and possibilities. "I'm suggesting you kiss your wife before your mother walks in and realizes this whole marriage is a fraud." Tang Sang's eyes darkened. "Michelle, unless you have a better idea." He didn't. Or maybe he did and chose not to use it. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and Michelle's breath caught. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't in any clause of their carefully worded agreement. But before his lips could meet hers, before whatever was about to happen could happen, the door burst open. Choi Min-ji stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 security guards, her face carved from ice and fury. Tang Sang's hand dropped from Michelle's face, but he didn't step back. Didn't create the distance that would have made this look like exactly what it was supposed to be. A business arrangement caught in the act of pretending. "Mother." His voice was steady, controlled. "You have a key. And you have a wife who should be in her own residence." Choi Min-ji's English was perfect, sharpened by decades of international business. Her gaze swept over Michelle like a blade. Especially at 3 a.m. Michelle felt the instinct to apologize, to explain, to shrink under that withering stare. But something about the way Tang Sang had stood his ground made her straighten her spine instead. "I brought urgent business documents. We were reviewing them." In his study? In the middle of the night? How convenient. Choi Min-ji dismissed the security guards with a wave and stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble. "I suppose this is the part where you both pretend this marriage is something more than the transaction we all know it to be." "It's whatever we decide it is," Tang Sang said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Michelle watched Choi Min-ji's expression shift from contempt to something far more dangerous. Attention. Is that so? The older woman moved closer, studying them both. Because the Tang Sang I raised understands that personal feelings are liabilities in business, that marriages are mergers, that love is a weakness competitors exploit. Then you should be pleased, Michelle said before she could stop herself, since there's no love here to exploit. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, especially with the phantom sensation of Tang Sang's almost kiss still burning on her skin. Choi Min-ji's eyes narrowed. Show me these urgent documents that couldn't wait until morning. Tang Sang moved to block the computer screen. It's a routine audit issue. Nothing that concerns. Everything about this company concerns me. She pushed past him, and Michelle watched in horror as the spreadsheets with their red-flagged transactions filled her view. For a long moment, Choi Min-ji said nothing, just scrolled through the data with the precision of someone who'd built an empire by knowing every number that mattered. When she finally turned around, her face was unreadable. How long have you known? A few hours, Tang Sang said. And you brought your contract wife into this instead of your own financial team, instead of me? The accusation hung heavy in the air. What exactly did you think would happen here? That she'd solve this mystery and you'd play detective together? This is not a game, Tang Sang. This is $7 million and potentially our entire merger at stake. Which is exactly why I couldn't bring it to anyone inside the company, he shot back. Whoever's stealing from us has access to systems that only senior management can touch. I needed someone outside that circle. So you chose her? A woman you've known for 3 weeks? A woman who has every reason to… Choi Min-ji stopped abruptly, but Michelle heard the unfinished accusation clearly. To what? Michelle asked coldly. To steal from you myself? I found the fraud. I brought it to your son. If I were the thief, why would I do that? To divert suspicion, to appear innocent while you've already hidden the real extent of the damage. Choi Min-ji's smile was thin and sharp. I've seen this play before, Miss Williams, though usually the gold diggers are less creative about it. The slur hit like a physical blow, but Michelle refused to flinch. She'd heard worse. Being a young black woman in predominantly white, wealthy spaces had taught her how to armor herself against exactly this kind of casual cruelty. That's enough. Tang Sang's voice cut through the tension. Michelle found evidence that our accountant missed. She's been working to trace the pattern. If you can't see the value in that, then maybe you need to ask yourself why. Mother and son stared at each other in a silent battle that Michelle suspected had been waging for years. Finally, Choi Min-ji looked away first. Fine. She can continue investigating. But under supervision. I want daily reports, full transparency, and the moment you find who's responsible, you bring them to me. Not the auditors, not the board. Me. She moved toward the door, then paused. And Tang Sang? Remember what's at stake here. The merger. The company. Your future. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment. After she left, the silence felt suffocating. Michelle sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I'm sorry, Tang Sang said quietly. She had no right to. She had every right. This is her company. I'm just the outsider she was forced to tolerate for 60 days. Michelle looked up at him. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe you should bring in real investigators. No. He crouched down so they were eye level. You were right about the pattern. You're right about not trusting anyone internal. And what my mother thinks about you has nothing to do with your ability to find the truth. She thinks I'm a gold digger. She thinks everyone is a gold digger until they prove otherwise. It took her 5 years to trust my father, and they were married for 30. Something flickered in his expression. He died when I was 12. After that, she decided the only person she could truly rely on was herself. Everyone else was either an asset or a threat. Which one am I? Tang Sang stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she took it, he didn't let go right away. You're the person who showed up at midnight to protect something that isn't yours. That makes you something my mother hasn't seen in a long time. What's that? Someone who does the right thing even when there's no profit in it. Michelle wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was doing this for the money, for the doubled payment he'd offered. But the truth was more complicated. Somewhere between reviewing spreadsheets and almost kissing him, the lines had blurred. "We should get some sleep," she said, pulling her hand away. "If we're going to investigate, we need to start with your mother's accountant tomorrow." "Today," Tang Sang corrected, glancing at the window where dawn was starting to lighten the sky. "It's already tomorrow." Michelle gathered her things, but at the door she hesitated. "Earlier, when your mother walked in, you were going to kiss me." To maintain the cover story. "Right." The cover story. She met his eyes. "We should probably discuss parameters. If we're going to convince people this marriage is real, we need to establish what's acceptable and what crosses the line." "What do you think crosses the line?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. The contract specified separate residences, no physical intimacy beyond what was required for public appearances, and absolutely no emotional entanglement. But contracts were written by lawyers in bright offices, not by two people standing in a doorway at dawn, still feeling the echo of what almost happened. "I think," Michelle said carefully, "that we're already way past the line." Tang Sang nodded slowly. "Then maybe we need to redraw it." Before she could ask what he meant, his phone rang. He answered it, and Michelle watched his face transform from the almost vulnerable man she'd spent the night with back into the CEO mask he wore so well. "When?" he asked sharply. Then, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Michelle with an expression that made her stomach drop. "What happened?" "My mother's accountant, Lee Jin-ho. He's dead." The world tilted. "Dead? How?" "His wife found him an hour ago. Apparent suicide, pills and alcohol." Tang Sang was already moving, grabbing his jacket, his keys. "But the timing is too perfect to be coincidental," Michelle finished. "Someone knew we were investigating. Or someone panicked." He stopped at the door. "Go home. Don't tell anyone what you found. Don't talk to anyone from the company. I'll call you once I know more." But Michelle was already shaking her head. If Lee Jin-ho's death wasn't suicide, then whoever killed him knows we're onto them. Sending me away alone makes me an easier target. "You think you're in danger?" "I think someone just committed murder to hide $7 million in fraud. I think I'm the only other person who's seen the evidence. And I think going home alone would be the stupidest thing I could do right now." Tang Sang stared at her for a long moment, then made a decision. "You're coming with me. Stay close. Don't say anything about the investigation. And if anyone asks, you're there as my wife, not as an investigator." They rode the elevator down in tense silence. In the parking garage, Tang Sang opened the passenger door of his black Mercedes, and Michelle slid inside, her mind racing. An accountant dead within hours of them discovering the fraud. It couldn't be suicide. It was too convenient, too tidy. As Tang Sang pulled out onto the empty pre-dawn streets, Michelle's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. "Hello?" Silence, then breathing. Heavy, deliberate breathing. "Who is this?" Michelle demanded. The voice that answered was distorted, mechanical, like something run through a computer program. "Stop looking where you don't belong, Mrs. Tang. Lee Jin-ho learned what happens to people who ask too many questions. You could be next." The line went dead. Michelle's hands were shaking. Tang Sang noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" She told him about the call and watched his knuckles go white on the steering wheel. "Change of plans," he said, making a sudden U-turn. "We're not going to Lee Jin-ho's house. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one knows about." He pulled out his phone, made a quick call in Korean, then turned to her. "I'm taking you off the grid until we figure out who's behind this. You can't just hide me away. If we stop investigating, if you die, the investigation doesn't matter. His voice was hard, final. I already lost one person today. I'm not losing you too. The admission hung between them, more intimate than the almost kiss, more binding than any contract. Michelle realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that somewhere in the past few hours, this had stopped being about money or mergers or maintaining a cover story. This had become real, and that made it infinitely more dangerous. The safe house was a converted warehouse in a part of the city Michelle had never seen, all exposed brick and industrial windows that Tang Sang immediately covered with blackout curtains. He'd made 3 more calls during the drive, each one brief and in Korean, and Michelle had watched him transform into someone she hadn't seen before. Not the polished CEO or the dutiful son, but something harder, more tactical. "How long have you had this place?" she asked as he checked the locks on the reinforced door. 6 years. My mother doesn't know about it. No one at the company does. He moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking sight lines, testing the security system. "When you grow up in the world I did, you learn to keep exits." The warehouse was sparse but functional, a kitchen area, a bathroom, and an open living space with a single bed pushed against the far wall. Michelle noticed there was only one bed and determinedly didn't think about what that meant. Tang Sang's phone rang. He answered, listened for 30 seconds, then ended the call without speaking. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" "Lee Jin-ho's laptop and phone are missing. His wife says the police told her it looks like suicide, but she insists he wasn't depressed, wasn't struggling. He'd just bought plane tickets for their anniversary trip next month." He sat down heavily on the industrial couch. "And there's something else. The security footage from my building last night. Someone accessed it remotely and deleted the hour before my mother arrived. Someone knew I was there. Someone's been watching us." Tang Sang looked at her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "Which means they knew about the investigation before I even offered to double your payment. They've been tracking our movements, probably listening to our calls." Michelle thought about the USB drive, about how the accountant had supposedly sent her those files by mistake. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if someone deliberately sent me that information, knowing I'd bring it to you? A setup, to make us look like we were involved in the fraud. Tang Sang was already on his feet, pacing. If Lee Jin-ho was the fall guy, and we were the ones who discovered the evidence right before he died, we'd be perfect suspects. But we have the original files. We can prove, can we? The files came from Lee Jin-ho's account. He's dead. And now we're hiding in a secret warehouse, which makes us look guilty as hell. He stopped pacing and faced her. This was planned. All of it. The question is, planned by who? Michelle's mind was racing through the possibilities. Who benefits from the fraud being discovered right before the merger? Who benefits from your mother's accountant dying? Who benefits from us looking suspicious? Someone who wants the merger to fail. Someone who... Tang Sang's eyes widened. Someone who wants my mother to lose control of the company. If the merger falls through because of fraud and her own son is implicated, the board would have grounds to remove her. Who on the board has the most to gain? My uncle, Park Jae-sung, my mother's younger brother. He's been angling for control since my father died, but my mother's kept him in a vice president position with no real power. Tang Sang pulled out his phone, then stopped. I can't call anyone. If they're monitoring communications, we need to get to your uncle before whoever's behind this frames us completely. Michelle stood up, adrenaline overriding her fear. We need proof that someone else accessed those accounts. We need to show the pattern started before I ever came into the picture. That means going back into the company servers, which means going back to my office. Isn't that exactly where they'd expect us to go? Tang Sang smiled, and it was sharp and dangerous. Which is why we're not going during business hours. We're going at midnight tonight when the building is mostly empty and security is minimal. He moved closer to her, but that gives us 12 hours in hiding. Together. Alone. The implications settled between them like smoke, Michelle was acutely aware that they were standing in a space with one bed, that his shirt was still unbuttoned at the collar from earlier, that somewhere in the chaos of murder and fraud and running for their lives, the almost kiss from his roof garden apartment still hung in the air between them. "The contract says," she started. "I don't care what the contract says anymore." Tang Sang's voice was low, honest. "Someone tried to threaten you. Someone might have killed a man to keep this secret. The contract was written for a fake marriage to satisfy investors. This stopped being fake the moment you walked into my roof garden apartment at midnight." Michelle's heart was pounding. "When did it stop being fake for you?" "Honestly, I think it was never fake. Not really." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about corporate dynasties and arranged marriages. "My mother chose you because she thought you'd be easy to control, young, broke, desperate enough to sign anything. She thought you'd play your part and disappear." "Maybe I will. After 60 days. Will you?" His hand lingered on her cheek. "Because the woman I've spent the last 12 hours with doesn't disappear. She shows up at midnight with evidence of fraud. She stands her ground against Choi Min-ji. She figures out in minutes what trained accountants missed for months. That woman doesn't play any part. She's just herself, and that's—" "What?" "Terrifying," he admitted. "Because my whole life has been about control, about calculated moves and strategic marriages and never letting anyone close enough to be a liability. And then you show up, and suddenly I'm making decisions that have nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with keeping you safe." Michelle should have stepped back, should have reminded him about the contract, about the 60-day limit, about the $1 million waiting for her at the end of this charade. Should have done anything except what she did. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle or questioning like the almost kiss from before. It was fierce and certain, the kind of kiss that burned bridges and rewrote contracts. Tang Sang's arms came around her, immediately pulling her closer, and Michelle felt something shift in her chest, something that had been locked away since the day she'd signed her name on that contract and promised herself she wouldn't feel anything real for this man. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tang Sang rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things. Everything's already complicated?" "True." He smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him. Unguarded and young and almost boyish. "But now it's complicated in a way that makes me want to survive the next 12 hours even more." They spent the day planning their midnight infiltration, mapping out security routes and backup exits. But beneath the tactical discussions, Michelle felt the weight of what had changed between them. Every accidental touch lingered. Every shared glance held promises that had nothing to do with contracts or mergers. Around 6 in the evening, Tang Sang ordered food from a restaurant that didn't deliver, using a burner phone and a fake name. They ate Thai food straight from the containers sitting on the industrial couch, and Michelle learned that he'd wanted to be a photographer before his father died, that he still had nightmares about the car accident that killed him, that his mother had never remarried because she said love was a luxury she couldn't afford twice. "Do you believe that?" Michelle asked. "That love is a luxury?" "I used to. It's what I was raised to believe, that emotions were weaknesses, that marriages were mergers, that the only thing that mattered was the empire." He looked at her. "But then I met someone who walked into my life for money and somehow made me question everything I thought I knew." "I did walk into your life for money," Michelle said quietly. "My mother has stage 4 cancer. The treatments aren't covered by insurance. My sister's getting married next year, and I can't even afford to help with the wedding. I signed that contract because $1 million was more money than I'd ever see otherwise, and I told myself it was just business, just 60 days of pretending. And now I'm in a warehouse with a man I've known for 3 weeks, preparing to break into a corporate office to prove we didn't commit fraud and murder. And I'm terrified because this stopped being pretend, and I don't know what happens when the 60 days are up." Tang Sang set down his food and turned to face her fully. "What if the 60 days don't matter? What if we tear up the contract and write a new one?" Your mother would never allow— My mother doesn't get to decide who I love. The word hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect. Michelle wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that 3 weeks could be enough time to fall in love, that a contract marriage could become something real, that a black girl from Baltimore and a Korean heir to a business empire could somehow make sense together. But before she could respond, Tang Sang's burner phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He read it, and his face went white. "What is it?" He showed her the screen. The message was simple, devastating. "Your mother knows where you are. She's coming with the police. You have 1 hour to turn yourselves in, or I release the evidence that you and Michelle embezzled the $7 million together. Your choice, your freedom or your empire. You can't have both." Michelle felt the room spin. It's a trap. If we run, we look guilty. If we stay, we get arrested for fraud we didn't commit. There's a third option. Tang Sang was already moving, grabbing laptops, phones, the USB drive with the original evidence. "We don't run, and we don't stay. We go to my office now, 3 hours ahead of schedule, and we get the proof we need before whoever's behind this can stop us. The building will still have security, we'll be spotted. Not if we go in the way my mother doesn't know about." He grabbed her hand. "When my father designed the Tang Industries building, he put in a maintenance tunnel from the parking garage to the executive floor. Only 3 people knew about it. My father, my mother, and me. He showed it to me a week before he died, said every empire needs a secret escape route. They were out the door and in the car within 5 minutes, racing through traffic as the sun set over the city." Michelle's mind was spinning through scenarios, each one worse than the last. If they got caught, they'd be arrested. If they didn't get caught but failed to find evidence, they'd still be arrested. And if they succeeded but couldn't prove who was really behind the fraud, they'd spend the rest of their lives running. But as Tang Sang took her hand across the center console, threading his fingers through hers, Michelle realized she'd made her choice the moment she kissed him. She was all in, contract or no contract, 60 days or forever. The parking garage was empty when they arrived. Tang Sang led her to a maintenance door marked "Authorized personnel only" and punched in a code that made the lock click open. Behind it was a narrow concrete tunnel lit by emergency lighting. "Stay close," he whispered. "The tunnel runs directly under the building. It comes up in a storage room adjacent to my office." They moved quickly through the tunnel, and Michelle tried not to think about what they'd find at the end. Tried not to think about the text message, about the police, about Choi Min-ji, discovering her son had betrayed her for a woman she'd dismissed as temporary. The tunnel ended at a metal ladder. Tang Sang climbed first, then helped pull Michelle up into a storage room filled with filing cabinets and office supplies. He checked the door, confirmed the hallway beyond was empty, and they slipped into his office. The city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Tang Sang powered up his computer. "I need 15 minutes to access the server logs and trace the original breach. If security does rounds, they'll come by in 20. Michelle kept watch at the door while Tang Sang's fingers flew over the keyboard. 5 minutes passed. 10. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel sweat starting to form despite the air conditioning. "Got it," Tang Sang breathed. "The first suspicious transaction was 18 months ago, just like you said. But look at the user ID attached to it." Michelle leaned over his shoulder and felt her blood turn to ice. The user ID belonged to someone with executive access, someone who'd been with the company for decades, someone who had every reason to want Choi Min-ji removed from power. But it wasn't Park Jae-sung. It was Choi Min-ji herself. "That's impossible," Michelle whispered. "Why would your mother steal from her own company?" "She wouldn't, which means someone with access to her credentials has been setting her up." Tang Sang was already downloading the evidence, copying files to multiple drives. Someone who knew that if she was implicated in fraud, the board would have grounds to remove her. Someone who— The office lights blazed on. Standing in the doorway, backed by 4 security guards and 2 police officers, was Park Jae-sung, and next to him, looking calm and collected and utterly in control, was someone Michelle recognized from the wedding photos in Tang Sang's roof garden apartment. Jung Hae-won, the woman Choi Min-ji had originally chosen for Tang Sang to marry, the woman from the right family with the right connections, the woman who was supposed to be in Seoul. "Hello, Tang Sang," Hae-won said sweetly, her English perfect and cold. "Thank you for doing exactly what I needed you to do, breaking into the building after hours, accessing secured files, running from the police. It's almost too easy to paint you as desperate criminals," she smiled. "And now you're going to hand over all that evidence you just downloaded, or I'll have my associate here call your mother and tell her you've been embezzling from the company to fund your fake wife's lavish lifestyle." Tang Sang stood slowly, and Michelle saw murder in his eyes. "You framed Lee Jin-ho. You killed him. Lee Jin-ho was weak. He was going to confess. I simply helped him make a more permanent decision." Hae-won stepped closer, and Michelle realized this woman was genuinely dangerous, the kind of dangerous that hid behind designer clothes and perfect manners. "You were supposed to marry me, Tang Sang. Your mother and I had an agreement, but then you decided to play hero with this American girl, and suddenly I was yesterday's news. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? How much money I lost in business opportunities because I was no longer going to be Mrs. Tang?" "So you decided to destroy the company instead?" Michelle asked. "To frame us for fraud, to murder an innocent man." "I decided to take what should have been mine." Hae-won's eyes were flat, emotionless. "And here's what's going to happen. Tang Sang is going to transfer those files to me, sign a confession admitting he embezzled the money, and then he's going to divorce you and disappear. Maybe to Singapore, maybe to Switzerland. I don't really care. And you, Michelle, are going to go back to America and forget any of this ever happened." "And if we refuse?" Tang Sang's voice was steel. Hae-won pulled out her phone and showed them a video. Michelle's stomach dropped. It was footage of them in the warehouse safe house, kissing, planning, discussing the investigation. Every word captured, every moment recorded. "If you refuse, this goes to the police, the board, and the media, along with fabricated evidence that you've been having an affair for months before your marriage, that you planned this fraud together, that poor Lee Jin-ho discovered your scheme and you killed him to keep him quiet." Hae-won's smile was poison. "You'll spend the next 20 years in prison, both of you." Michelle felt Tang Sang's hand find hers, squeezing once hard. She knew what he was thinking. They were trapped. Even if they tried to fight their way out, the security guards were armed. Even if they ran, the video would destroy them. Even if they told the truth, who would believe them over Jung Hae-won, daughter of one of Korea's most powerful families? But then Tang Sang did something Michelle didn't expect. He smiled. "You made one mistake," he said quietly. "What's that?" "You assumed I came here alone with Michelle. You assumed we didn't have our own backup plan." He raised his voice slightly. "Mother, I think you've heard enough." From the shadows of the adjacent office, Choi Min-ji stepped into view, her phone held up, recording everything. Behind her were 2 more men Michelle recognized from the wedding, board members, senior executives, witnesses. Hae-won's face went white. This is a setup," Tang Sang finished. "The burner phone you sent that text to, traced, the warehouse, bugged. We knew someone was watching us, so we gave them a show. We let you think you had us cornered so you'd get cocky enough to confess everything." He looked at his mother. "Though I'll admit, I didn't know you'd figured it out too." Choi Min-ji's expression was unreadable. "You may be my son, but I didn't build an empire by being stupid. I knew something was wrong when Lee Jin-ho died. I knew someone was trying to frame us. I just needed to know who." She turned to Hae-won. "I trusted your family. We were going to merge our companies, and you repaid that by stealing from me, murdering my employee, and trying to destroy my son." The police officers moved forward, and Haewon's composure finally cracked. "You can't prove anything, But Choi Min-ji just held up her phone, where Haewon's entire confession played back in crystal clarity. As the police handcuffed Haewon and Park Jae-sung, Michelle felt her legs go weak. Tang Sang caught her, held her steady, and she realized her hands were shaking. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. But when Michelle looked up at Choi Min-ji, she knew it wasn't over. Not really. The older woman dismissed everyone else from the office, leaving just the three of them. When the door closed, she turned to Michelle with an expression that was no longer contemptuous, but calculating. "You helped my son solve this case. You put yourself in danger to protect the company. That was unexpected." "I did it to protect Tang Sang," Michelle said honestly. The company was just a side effect. Something flickered in Choi Min-ji's eyes. Respect, maybe. Or perhaps just recognition of honesty when she heard it. "The 60-day contract is void," she said flatly. "You've fulfilled your obligation, and then some. You'll receive your payment, along with a bonus for your services in uncovering the fraud. After that, you're free to go." Michelle felt Tang Sang tense beside her. This was it. The moment where she could walk away with more money than she'd ever dreamed of. Where she could pay for her mother's treatment, help her sister, buy that gallery. Where she could return to her life and forget about contract marriages and dangerous heirs and kisses that felt like coming home. But when she looked at Tang Sang, she saw something in his eyes that made her choice inevitable. "What if I don't want to go?" she said quietly. Choi Min-ji raised an eyebrow. "Then you're a fool. My son's world is dangerous. You've seen that tonight. This won't be the last time someone tries to destroy us. If you stay, you'll always be a target." "I know. You'll never be fully accepted by our social circle. They'll always see you as the American girl who married for money." "I know that too. And you'll have to deal with me. I'm not an easy mother-in-law." "I'm not an easy daughter-in-law," Michelle shot back. For the first time since Michelle had met her, Choi Min-ji smiled. It was small, grudging, but real. "My son is in love with you," she said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. "And I suspect you're in love with him, though you're both too proud to say it out loud. The question is, are you strong enough for this life?" Michelle thought about midnight visits and fraud investigations and threatening phone calls. Thought about almost kisses and real kisses and the way Tang Sang had said he'd choose her over his empire. Thought about her mother in Baltimore, her sister planning a wedding, her dreams of a gallery. And she thought about the man standing beside her, holding her hand like he'd never let go. "I guess we'll find out," she said. Choi Min-ji nodded slowly. "Then welcome to the family, Michelle Williams. But understand this. If you hurt my son, if you betray this family, if you ever give me reason to doubt your loyalty, I will destroy you. Are we clear?" "Crystal." "Good." Choi Min-ji moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The contract may have been for 60 days, but marriage is for life. If you're going to do this, you do it properly. No more separate residences, no more pretending. You're either all in or you're out." After she left, Michelle turned to Tang Sang. "Did your mother just give us her blessing?" "In the most terrifying way possible, yes." He pulled her close, and Michelle felt the tension of the last 24 hours finally release. "Though she's right. If we're doing this, we do it for real. No contracts, no 60-day limits. Just us." "Just us," Michelle echoed. "That's terrifying." "The best things usually are." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promises. "So what do you say, Mrs. Tang? Want to stay married to me?" Michelle thought about the answer for exactly half a second. "Yes, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You help me open that art gallery I've been dreaming about. I may be married to an empire, but I'm still my own person." Tang Sang laughed, genuine and free. "Deal. Though I warn you, my mother's going to want to be involved. She has opinions on everything." "I can handle your mother." "I know you can. That's one of the many reasons I love you." The words hung in the air between them, and Michelle felt her breath catch. 3 weeks ago, she'd signed a contract for a fake marriage. Tonight, she was choosing a real one, with all its complications and dangers and possibilities. "I love you too," she whispered, "even though this is completely insane." The best love stories usually are. They stood there in his office, high above the city, holding each other as dawn started to break over the skyline. Tomorrow there would be police statements and board meetings and media scrutiny. Tomorrow they'd have to figure out how to navigate a real marriage in the midst of corporate politics and family drama. But tonight, wrapped in Tang Sang's arms, Michelle allowed herself to believe in fairy tales, in contract marriages that became love stories, in finding home in the least expected place. Her phone buzzed. Message from an unknown number. She almost didn't check it, but something made her look. The message contained a single photo. Her mother's hospital room. Her mother, asleep in the bed. And standing next to her, face obscured by shadows, was a figure holding a syringe. Below the photo, a message. Yoonghai Won wasn't working alone, and your mother just became collateral. If you want her to live through the night, you'll get me what I need. Complete access to Tang Industries' offshore accounts. You have 3 hours. Come alone or she dies. Tell Tang Sang, and she dies. Call the police, and she dies. The address will be texted to you in 2 hours. I suggest you start driving to Baltimore now. Michelle's hands went numb. The phone slipped from her grip, and Tang Sang caught it before it hit the floor. She watched his face as he read the message, watched the colour drain from his expression. "Michelle?" But she was already moving, grabbing her coat, her keys, her purse. Already planning the 3-hour drive to Baltimore, already calculating how to get the access codes Tang Sang had, already preparing to betray everything they'd just fought for. Because in the end, the choice was simple. Her mother's life, or Tang Sang's empire. And Michelle had already decided which one mattered more.